COVID-19 strain currently circulating in the island identified. Strain contains high transmissibility and high viral load.
ප්‍රභේදය මාරාන්තික ප්‍රභේදය හැදිච්ච ගමන් මාරාන්තිකම කියලා අපිට කියන්න බෑ. හැබැයි අපි දන්න දැනට තියෙන data වල අනුවට තමයි මේක viral load එක වැඩි සහ
Decision to relax quarantine curfew in the Western Province will only be made following a thorough review. A statement from the Army Commander. New Chinese ambassador appointed to Sri Lanka. Wild elephant attack claims the life of a 3-year-old in Puttlam.
Very good evening. You're watching Primetime News on TV1. I'm Tarush Kumar Singha. Those were your headlines. On to a more comprehensive look of those stories and more. A study conducted by the Sri Jayawardhanapura University has identified that the strand of the COVID-19 virus that caused the current outbreak in the country. Minister of Health Pavitra Vanniyarachi said that the ministry has received the report.
The COVID-19 virus strand has been identified as B142. The study was conducted by scientists at the Department of Immunology and Allergy Immunology and Cell Biology Unit of the University of Sri Jayawardhanapura.
The COVID-19 virus circulating currently in Sri Lanka, and we have identified that the current viral lineage belongs to B142 lineage, which is similar to the viruses circulating in countries like Denmark and Sweden. We have carried out whole genome sequencing for 16 viruses, 16 strains originating from Brandix, Minwangwada, Colombo Municipal Council area and Bedwell Fish Market, and we found that out of those 16, we were able to successfully sequence 13 out of them, and 12 out of 13 were belonged to a single lineage, that is B142 lineage. 15 out of 16 strains had B614G mutation, which is associated with high viral load and higher rates of transmissibility. So the previous strains that circulated in Sri Lanka were B1, B2, B1.1 and B4 lineages, and especially the Kandakadu cluster was a B1 lineage. And therefore the current virus strain is slightly different as it belongs to the B142 lineage.
What are the measures that will be taken with regard to the curfew that was imposed in the Western Province until Monday? Head of the National Operations Centre for Prevention of COVID-19 Outbreak, Lieutenant General Shavendra Silva, spoke about this in Kilinochchi today.
The quarantine curfew in the Western Province is scheduled to be lifted on Monday the 2nd of November, but according to the report submitted by 10 this morning, we will have to analyze the situation before we proceed any further. COVID-19 cases are being reported mainly in Colombo and Gampaha. There are a few cases from Kalutara as well. We need to analyze all of this.
Meanwhile, 454 people who left the Western Province before curfew came into effect have been quarantined at the hotels and inns they were lodging at.
454 people who were staying at hotels and other inns in violation of quarantine regulations were quarantined at the places they were lodging at. These people will be quarantined under the direction of the health officers in those respective divisions. If some of these people cannot be identified during these operations, people returning on the 2nd of November will be searched extensively at the entry points to the Western Province, and they will be quarantined. Afterwards, depending on the evidence that is uncovered, steps will be taken to file charges against them. Meanwhile, the total number of COVID-19 cases across the island stands at 10,561. According to Army Commander Lieutenant General Shavendra Silva, 137 new COVID-19 cases have been reported today. Meanwhile, 117 people have been cured from the virus, bringing the total number of people who recovered to 4,399. On a more unfortunate note, the 20th COVID-19 death was reported today as well.
Police media spokesperson DIG Adit Rohana said that a total number of 78 police officers have been infected with COVID-19 as of now. Adding further, he said that close to 300 police officers have been directed to quarantine.
78 police officers have contracted COVID-19. They are currently being treated and close to 300 police officers have been directed for quarantine. In addition to this, 1,800 officers have been advised to self-quarantine. Not a single police officer contracted the virus in the time period from March to June. They were adhering to proper health guidelines. Police officers who are on duty on the road have been safe from the virus because they are following proper health guidelines. But police officers have visited the Palyagoda fish market. That is how the spread has started.
අලකැටියට කටයුතු කරන්නේ ඔවුන්ට මේ රෝගය ආසාදනය වීමෙන් තමයි මේ ව්‍යාප්තිය ඇති වුනේ.
Meanwhile, an employee at the Ministry of Health has tested positive for COVID-19.
මේ සෞඛ්‍ය අමාත්‍යාංශයේ
One employee at the Ministry of Health has tested positive for COVID-19 after a PCR test was conducted on him. Based on the information we received from him, we have taken extra steps to prevent the virus from spreading. The person who tested positive is currently receiving treatment. Others have been directed to quarantine.
කරලා ඒ මේ රෝගිය කැටියට හඳුනාගත්ත පුද්ගලයාව අපි මේ වෙනකොට රෝහල්ගත කරලා තියෙනවා. ඉතිරි අයව අපි නිරෝධායනයට ලක් කරලා තියෙනවා.
It has been confirmed that 4 employees at the Ministry of Mass Media have also tested positive for the virus. According to the Director General of the Government Information Department, Lanka, an Assistant Director, a Development Officer and 2 office assistants have tested positive for the virus. Adding further, he said that 40 employees have been directed to quarantine and that steps have been taken to carry out the affairs at the ministry following health guidelines. Steps have been taken to temporarily shut down a garment factory in Horana after an employee at the factory was tested positive. A female employee was tested positive when a random PCR test was carried out at the garment premises.
We have discovered 170 close associates of this patient. All of them will be subject to PCR tests. We will receive the test results on Monday. At the moment, we have shut down that facility and steps have been taken to disinfect the premises. In addition to this patient, 24 more people tested positive from Horana.
මහලු වෙළඳාම ආශ්‍රිත රෝගීන් අදාළ කර්මාන්ත ශාලාවේ සේවිකාවට කොවිඩ් වල ආකාර පිළිබඳ බැලදිච්ච ආකාරයේ සම්බන්ධව අපිට තාම හරියටම කියන්න බෑ. අය මාළු ඒ මාකට් එකටවත් බැංකුවේ ආයතනයටවත් සම්බන්ධ නැති විත්ති අපිට කියන්න පුළුවන්.
200 close contacts were subjected to PCR test in Kurunegala, Mallavapitiya and Vilgoda. Travel restrictions have been imposed in these areas as well. 16 new cases were discovered from these areas in the last 2 days. Health authorities advised today to not sell fish even near the Chilao fish market against the prevailing COVID-19 situation of the country. The Chilao fish market was shut down recently, but fishmongers continue to sell fish near the market. The Hatton town, which was declared as an isolated area, was reopened today under many restrictions. Few shops were allowed to open today, but the Hatton public market, at which the first case was discovered from Hatton, was not permitted to open. Public health inspectors took steps to close down several outlets which were open in the market premise.
It has been 14 days since these 7 people were discovered. We do not know how many people have had close ties with them. Even the people lie to us.
The Public Health Inspector of the Hatton Dikkoy Municipal Council, RRS Madhavala, who took steps to shut down shops in areas this morning, has been interrupted by Provincial Councillor, and the PHI have filed a complaint to the Hatton Police Station regarding the incident. With the discovery of 11 cases of COVID-19 from Buttala Kohupitiya in Kegol, families in 70 houses in Bulat Kohupitiya, Lower Nelsnear, Lavala, Ambamalla and Pannala have been advised to be self-quarantined.
According to the Chief Epidemiologist of the Epidemiology Unit, Dr. Sudat Samarveera, the 20th COVID-19 death in the country was reported earlier today. The victim was a 54-year-old resident of Colombo 12. She too was diabetic.
Sri Lanka ජාතික කොහල්ට ඔක්තෝබර් 29 වෙනිදා ඇතුළත් කරන ලද
A 54-year-old woman from Colombo 12 who was admitted to the National Hospital on the 29th of October passed away due to COVID-19 yesterday. She was admitted to the hospital due to high blood sugar, vomiting and abdominal pain. However, the results of her PCR test confirms that she tested positive for COVID-19.
උදරයේ වේදනාවක් සමගයි
ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ මේ දක්වා වාර්තා වූ කොරෝනා මරණ සියල්ලක්ම වාගේ අපිට දක්නට ලැබෙන්නේ විවිධ දීර්ඝකාලීන.
We have noticed that most of the people who test positive for COVID-19 are already suffering from certain terminal illnesses. These patients are more susceptible as their bodies are already weak. The virus travels to the lungs and other parts of the body, causing pneumonia. It is very likely for blood clots to be caused when a person tests positive for the virus. There are higher chances of this happening to patients who already suffer from diabetes or tendencies of heart attacks. These patients would be victims of sudden deaths as a result of this without any symptoms of pneumonia. As of now, at least 3 deaths due to these reasons have been reported in Sri Lanka.
මේ ආකාරයේ මරණ 3ක් පමණ මේ වන විට ශ්‍රී ලංකාවෙන් වාර්තා වෙලා තිබෙනවා.
Meanwhile, dry rations were distributed among people who have been quarantined in the Colombo district.
If these people can be controlled, there is no need of imposing curfew to this entire area. These people's food problems will be addressed today. If these people are controlled and kept under home quarantine, then some concessions can be given to the rest of the people here. If you are responsible and stay indoors for 14 days, it is good for you. It is good for your neighbors, and this problem can be solved completely. So if you need anything, there is a police officer who supervises you. Do you need his phone number? Please call that phone number and inform him if you need any medicine or have any other need. The items you need will be delivered to you like this.
මේ වෙනකොට නිරෝධායන වන
6,728 families have been quarantined in areas falling under 13 divisional secretariats. The government has already provided me with 75 million rupees to distribute dry rations to these families for 14 days. Under that program, we are providing the dry rations needed for these families in Gunasinghapura. I have been advised to provide a 5,000 rupee allowance to low-income families. I have been informed that funds for this too will be provided soon. By next week, we will take steps to provide that amount as well.
ඒ අනුව අපි ඒකත් ලබන සතිය වෙනකොට රුපියල් 5000 දීමනාවත් ලබා දීමට කටයුතු කරනවා.
Police officers on duty were also provided with refreshments.
A large number of people had not left the Western Province, although that is the false claim circulating on social media. But the small number of people who did leave the Western Province will be questioned at the entry points to the Western Province, and if they had gone on trips and other non-essential travel, action will be filed against them according to regulations under the quarantine ordinance. At a time when the general public is suffering, the police have not taken steps to file cases against them and fine them. We will look at the issues humanely, and if someone has acted extremely irresponsibly and flouted the regulations, it is only then we will take legal action. Opposition leader Sajith Premadasa posed a question to the Minister of Health when he visited the Sri Saliya Raja Temple in Rajanganaya. If you take a look back at the beginning of October, before the second COVID-19 outbreak began, there were only about 3,308 patients in the country. As of today, within these 4 weeks, that number has risen beyond 7,000. Now it has increased to 10,000. Is Minister Pavitra Vanyarachi still saying that there is no outbreak in the society? It has come to a point where political interests have become more important than the health of the people, and achieving political objectives has become the agenda of the country. Parliamentary activities will be held for a limited time period on Tuesday of the coming week, 1 day. It was okay to convene Parliament for days to pass the 20th Amendment. Now, when the initiative of preventing the COVID-19 outbreak under the leadership of the Minister of Health is failing, Parliament is being convened only for a day. One thing is clear from this. The current government has made achieving their political objectives a priority rather than curbing the spread of COVID-19.
Meanwhile, holy water or Piritpan was sprinkled from the air in hope of bringing good health to the people of Sri Lanka and an end of the COVID-19 pandemic in the country. The holy water was blessed while chanting the Ratana Sutra was sprinkled from a privately owned helicopter at the 4 corners of the island.
According to the instructions and advice of Samantha Bhadra Thera and the directions of the President, Prime Minister, Army Commander, former President and politicians of Polonnaruwa district, a Pirit chanting ceremony was held last night to bless water while chanting the Ratana Sutra. We sprayed the water from the sky over all 4 corners of the island and the central airspace of the island
in hope that it will be a blessing for us all.
In more news from the political arena of the country, at a meeting held in Anuradhapura yesterday, it was revealed that a decision has been reached whereby members of local government bodies from the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna and the Sri Lanka Freedom Party will function as one group. In more news, a stock of equipment used for illegal gem mining in Kiriyalla, Ratnapura has been seized by the police. Now, according to the police, a group of people had engaged in illegal gem mining on the Kalu River in the Nidane area in Kiriyalla. Interrogations have revealed that this has been occurring for a prolonged period of time. Our correspondent said that officers of the police special task force had raided the area last night. Let me read once again one of the news items that we missed tonight. At a meeting held in Anuradhapura yesterday, it was revealed that the decision has been reached whereby members of local government bodies from Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna and the Sri Lanka Freedom Party will function as one group.
Members of the local government bodies in the Anuradhapura district from the Sri Lanka Freedom Party and the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna held a meeting at the Central Province Auditorium yesterday. Minister S.M. Chandrasena and State Minister Duminda Disanayaka also attended the meeting representing the two parties. As per the advice of Basil Rajapaksha, a decision was reached that leaders of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party and the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna at a regional level should change how we function in local government bodies. Since things will get complicated if votes are casted against this, we were asked by the party to inform you all of this. Not all decisions taken by the government or a party will be easy to accept. But when we are looking as a party, we will ultimately look at the well-being of the country, the future of the government, and take all of these matters into consideration. Thereby, leaders of both parties reached a decision for all members of local government bodies from the Sri Lanka Freedom Party and the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna to sit a one group and act as one group. The party leaders also decided that we will work together in development activities in the future. There are 3 local government bodies in the Anuradhapura district where we are governing with the United National Party. We will discuss with the organizers of these areas in the future and task steps to hold power together between the Sri Lanka Freedom Party and the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna.
We sincerely apologize for the slight technical difficulty we experienced earlier. Moving on, a stock of equipment used for illegal gem mining in Kiriyalla, Ratnapura has been seized by the police. Let's take a look at the visuals.
According to the police, a group of people had engaged in illegal gem mining on the Kalu River in the Nidane area in Kiriyalla. Interrogations have revealed that this has been occurring for a prolonged period of time. Our correspondent said officers of the police special task force had raided the area last night. However, no person has been arrested. The equipment which was seized will be produced to court. Sri Lanka's geopolitics.
With the long shadow of history always in the background,
Sri Lanka's vital geopolitical value is what prompted the Portuguese, Dutch and British to colonize us. The strategy of choice used by all 3 was agreements. It was these agreements signed between local rulers and colonial powers that led us to losing our independence. Are we on the cusp of seeing history being repeated itself?
with the long shadow of history always in the background, it is not unusual that Sri Lankans view the sudden extra attention paid towards our affairs by nations such as the United States, China, India and others with suspicion. Most recently, US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo took a whirlwind tour of Sri Lanka and claimed that the US will extend its support to create a free Indo-Pacific region. The Secretary of State stirred controversy when he claimed that China was a predator while addressing the media during his tour of Sri Lanka.
We see from bad deals, violations of sovereignty and lawlessness on land and sea that the Chinese Communist Party is a predator.
The American policy concerning Sri Lanka and its ocean was clearly not one which was formulated impulsively. America has drawn up well-thought-out plans to counter the growing dominance of China, spearheaded through its Belt and Road Initiative. Sri Lanka's geopolitical location acts as a linchpin towards the success of the United States Master Plan. On the 12th of February 2019, in testimony before the Senate Armed Services Committee on U.S. Indo-Pacific Command Posture, Admiral Philip S. Davidson, the U.S. Navy Commander for the United States Indo-Pacific Command, noted Sri Lanka remains a significant strategic opportunity in the Indian Ocean. He added that while military engagement between Sri Lanka and the United States continues to progress, the United States, quote-unquote, should enhance its military presence in Sri Lanka. Several examples of this are the arrival of the USS John C. Stennis aircraft carrier to Trincomalee and conducting cargo transfers, providing training to Sri Lankan forces, enhancing the Coast Guard capabilities and providing an American Coast Guard vessel to Sri Lanka as initiatives which have enhanced America's presence in Sri Lanka. In line with the agreements reached under the AXA agreement, which was initially signed in 2007 and expanded in 2017, the US conducted several military supply operations through Sri Lanka in the recent past. In the very least, these agreements do not provide an opportunity for our authorities to inspect goods exchanged by US military transport aircraft at the Katunayaka airport. Meanwhile, the United States continues to criticize China's activities in Sri Lanka, emphasizing that Sri Lanka is trapped in a Chinese debt trap. The Hambantota port is often used as an apt example. China currently holds a majority stake in many Sri Lankan projects, including the Hambantota port, the port city and the South Container Terminal of the Colombo port. Proposals were put forth in the recent past to upgrade the East Container Terminal of the Colombo port, the port of Trincomalee and the Hambantota airport, with parties that are in agreement with the United States Indo-Pacific policy, including India and Japan. Meanwhile, the Chinese embassy in Colombo pointed out in a tweet that President Gotabaya Rajapaksa himself has noted that Sri Lanka has not fallen into a Chinese debt trap. The embassy states that the amount of Chinese loans obtained by Sri Lanka in 2018 amounted to only 12% of the country's total foreign debt, and it has further reduced to 10% in 2019. The embassy emphasized that $1.12 billion obtained through the lease of the Hambantota port was also utilized by Sri Lanka to repay loans obtained from the West. Meanwhile, addressing the virtual conference of the annual policy dialogue of the World Leadership Alliance, Club de Madrid, former President Chandrika Bandaranayake Kumaratunga expressed her views regarding Chinese loans.
We have had very good relations with China, Sri Lanka, I myself during my government, but we do not want to get subjugated economically or financially. We are getting caught up in a huge debt trap to one nation, one economically powerful nation, because of our economic and financial weakness. Some of our governments agree to have some of these nations, especially one, undertake massive development projects in our countries with loans granted at 6 to 9%, whereas the World Bank, as we know, the maximum that a respectable country would accept is about 1% from the World Bank, for example, 1% above LIBOR. So this has caught, for example, Sri Lanka is caught in a massive debt trap with loans negotiated by a previous government. We do not like that, and we see it as a form of neocolonialism.
Kee Zen-hong has been named as the new ambassador designate of China to Sri Lanka. He is an expert in China's Belt and Road Initiative. Sri Lanka is a civilization that for centuries coexisted and traded with the known world. Our ancient rulers always placed the interest of our nation before others. The non-aligned foreign policy is not something that is new to Sri Lanka. It is our ancient philosophy. Today, we have a situation where China wants to embroil Sri Lanka in its Belt Road, and the US wants us to champion its Indo-Pacific region. Both nations and their allies are pulling us in different directions with the sole objection of protecting their own interests. But who will protect our interests? Ultimately, as it was in history, it may come down to the people to stand against this modern-day colonialism. We are not the Belt Road, neither are we the Indo-Pacific. We have no use for lotus towers, empty ports, AXAs, sofas and MCCs. Leaders both here resolve to retain our independence is not. This is Sri Lanka, and the waters surrounding us is the Sea of Sri Lanka.
Speaking on the matter, former permanent representative of Sri Lanka to the United Nations office at Geneva, Tamara Kununayagam, expressed the following views.
In fact, a military alliance between the US and Sri Lanka already exists. By signing AXA in 2007 and then renewing it in 2017, Sri Lanka committed its strategic entry points, that is, its ports and airports, its armed forces, its military installations, food, oil and spare parts to the US for its war against China. The US Indo-Pacific strategy was initially to contain China through engagement. Today, it is to change the regime militarily. In fact, the Indo-Pacific does not exist except in America's vision for a world without China and for a world without Asia and for a world without sovereign states. Non-alignment is based on principles. It stands for, among other things, non-aggression, non-intervention, sovereignty, territorial integrity, cooperation and multilateralism. That is completely the opposite of what America's Indo-Pacific strategy is all about. Non-alignment is an anti-colonial and anti-imperialist movement. It rejects outright joining any defense alliance led by the United States.
As the COVID-19 pandemic and economic crisis continues to spread, the amount of money migrant workers sent home is projected to decline by 14% by 2021 compared to the pre-COVID-19 levels back in 2019.
According to the latest estimates published in the World Bank's Migration and Development Brief, remittance flows to low and middle income countries are projected to fall by 7% to $508 billion in 2020, followed by a further decline of 7.5% to $470 billion in 2021. The World Bank says in Sri Lanka, remittances are projected to fall by about 9% in 2020 to $6.7 billion. For the first time in recent history, the stock of international migrants is likely to decline in 2020 as new migration has slowed and return migration has increased. According to the central bank, inflows from worker remittances reached 130 billion rupees in September 2020, a 6% increase compared to the previous month and 40% higher compared to September last year. Remittance inflows during the January to September window this year reached 935.5 billion rupees, 6.7% higher compared to the corresponding period last year. The central bank has projected a 14.6% decline in the remittance income for the full year as it revisited its earlier projections due to the virus.
Specifically in March and April, there was a decline in remittances, a steep decline in remittances to Sri Lanka. But after April, the remittances started picking up, and by June 2020, the remittances surpassed 2019 amounts, and the September statistics showed that we have hit $700 million for September 2020. As we know, during the lockdown situations in countries of destination, in March and April, most of the migrant workers were not able to remit to Sri Lanka. So these backed up remittances may have been remitted in the subsequent months, and therefore we see a bumping up of the remittances in months after May 2020. With this uncertain situation, the risk involved in informal channels would have gone up. Therefore, the normal remittances that would have come under informal channels would have now been diverted to formal channels.
State Minister of Money and Capital Markets and State Enterprise Reforms Ajit Niwad Kabral said inflows from workers' remittances, savings on import restrictions and lower crude oil prices and improved export performance is projected to compress Sri Lanka's external current account deficit to below 1.5% of GDP in 2020.
Meanwhile, in a statement, State Minister of Money and Capital Markets and State Enterprise Reforms Ajit Niwad Kabral notes that all countries, including Sri Lanka, observed a contraction in economic activity, reduction in foreign exchange earnings, decrease in revenue collection and increase in health and welfare-related expenditure following the onset of COVID-19. However, it is the State Minister's view that the prompt measures set in place by the government and the central bank have greatly contributed in containing the unfavorable effects of the pandemic. The State Minister claims, quote, the expansion of the fiscal deficit and the increase in debt levels in 2020 should not be generalized as a prolonged debt distress, but rather as a one-off deviation from the clear fiscal consolidation path that has been well articulated in the new government's policy framework, unquote. In conclusion, the State Minister says, quote, Sri Lanka is justifiably proud of its immaculate debt service record without a single default, unquote.
On a more somber note tonight, a 3-year-old child residing in Karualagasa, Putlam, fell prey to a marauding wild elephant.
Mahin Arosha Nimsara had travelled to the temple last night to engage in religious observances with his mother to wish his father, who is suffering from leukemia, a speedy recovery. But an unexpected incident took place when a raging tusker broke into the temple grounds.
Many were engaging in the Bodhi Puja. All of a sudden there was a power cut. A lady who went to check what was wrong shouted that an elephant had entered the temple. Everyone moved away from the area. The child's mother saved herself, but the child could not.
The efforts of the area residents to save little Nimsara's life by admitting him to the Anamadu hospital proved futile, even though he was transferred to the Putlam hospital. The villagers said that elephants often encroach on the village from the Thabova Wildlife Sanctuary due to the Rajavigama electric fence being inactive. How many more lives should be lost until the human-elephant conflict is resolved?
According to the NBRO, Sri Lanka's air quality has dropped in an abnormal manner. The AQI stood at 153 today, which is considered unhealthy. The National Building and Research Organization said that the amount of particulate matter in the atmosphere has doubled in the last few days. The particulate material found in the air is PM 2.5. According to the US Air Quality Index, the smallest particulate material, PM 2.5, has the value of between 100 and 150, a condition that can have a profound effect on sensitive groups. Apart from the southern parts of the country, the particulate matter level in the atmosphere in Colombo, Kandy, Putlam, Vaunia, Jaffna and other places has increased. The air pollution levels had been low in urban areas of Sri Lanka during past few days due to relatively low vehicle movements with the COVID-19 pandemic situation in the country. The National Building and Research Organization said the reason behind this unexpected sudden increase of air quality level could be linked with the variation of the wind pattern around the island. It also added that air pollution level in the Indian Peninsula are higher at present and could be contributing to the drop in air quality. Both Trump and Biden will barnstorm across battleground states in the American Midwest, where the coronavirus pandemic has exploded again as they head into the final weekend before Election Day on the 3rd of November.
Trump will hold rallies in Michigan, Wisconsin and Minnesota, while Biden has planned to stop in Wisconsin and Minnesota as well as Iowa on his busiest day of campaigning yet.
I've dealt with guys like Trump my whole life, so have you. Guys who think because they have a lot more money that they're better than you, look down on you. I know, I acknowledge I got a bit of a chip on my shoulder, coming from an Irish Catholic neighborhood where it wasn't viewed as that being such a great thing. When I read something about how if I'm elected president, I'm going to be the first non-Ivy League person to occupy the White House in a long time.
President Donald Trump yesterday sought to support the Midwestern states where the coronavirus has roared back.
And we are rounding the turn on the pandemic with or without vaccine. We have the vaccine, it's going to come. But even without it, we're rounding the turn. Seniors will be first in line to get it, and it will be available free. It wasn't their fault, it wasn't our fault, it was the fault of China. We should have kept it within their limits. Our vaccine will eradicate the virus and the pandemic, and it will end. Quickly restore normal life. That's what we want, is normal life. Take us back 7 months.
According to the US elections prediction at the University of Florida, more than 83.5 million votes have been casted either by mail or in person, where nearly 61% of the total number of votes in the entire 2016 election.
Over to some unfortunate news that shocked the world earlier this evening. So Sean Connery, the Scottish-born actor who rocketed to fame as James Bond and became one of cinema's most popular and enduring international stars, passed away at the age of 90. So Sean Connery, long regarded as one of the best actors to have portrayed the role of James Bond, was knighted by Queen Elizabeth II in 2000 and marked his 90th birthday this August. His family confirmed that he died in his sleep while in the Bahamas. Earlier, foreign media reported that he had been unwell for some time as well. His acting career spanned decades, and his many awards included an Oscar, 2 BAFTAs, and 3 Golden Globes. He won the Academy Award for Best Actor in a Supporting Role in 1987's The Untouchables. Connery was polled on the Sunday Herald as the greatest living Scot in 2004 and in a 2011 Euro Millions survey as Scotland's greatest living national treasure. Besides his knighthood and his Academy Award, he received many accolades over his long career, including the Kennedy Center Honors in 1999 and the American Film Institute's Lifetime Achievement Award in 2006. More tragic news from overseas. Rescue teams in the Turkish port city of Izmir are hunting through the rubble of the collapsed buildings for survivors of yesterday's powerful earthquake. The death toll from the quake, which also struck the Greek island of Samos, has risen to 27, with over 800 people injured.
Delicate operations to pull people from the rubble in Izmir are taking place as hundreds of aftershocks hit the area. The US Geological Survey said the earthquake was 7.0 magnitude, but Turkey put it lower at 6.6. The shallow tremor triggered the tidal waves that hit coastal areas and islands in both Turkey and Greece. Work continued through the night to search for survivors in 20 buildings that were destroyed as a result of the earthquake. Officials said search and rescue operations had been completed in 8 buildings, while operations continued in 9 other locations. Some 70 survivors have been pulled out alive from the rubble so far.
With that, it's a wrap of Primetime News for today. I'm Tausha Kumar Singha. Take care and good night.
A force filled with commitment. 2 years of volunteerism and sacrifice. The time has come to form a force for your area. Transform yourself to lead your locality. Register now with 20 volunteers who wish to be a part of your team.